Last week, a friend of mine gave me a book to read as a thank you for sharing The Alchemist with him, a book that taught me this lesson. When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. I wanted to share this with you for two reasons. One, because a great book should never go unshared, and two, because the passage I'm going to read below relates directly to why I am posting this blog. You see, a few days ago, I realized I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in over 600 days. For me, alcohol was part of what deadened me inside, and fortuitously, this book arrived just in time to help me understand the true value in overcoming this enormous obstacle in my life. That book, The Greatest Miracle in the World, is about recognizing your purpose in the world and acting upon it. The author of The Alchemist calls this process becoming your personal legend. In the book, the character meets an individual who helps him realize this purpose and potential through several chance meetings. Obviously, the man is God, working his purpose on earth to provide a guide for how humans can achieve enlightenment. In the book, the following passage stood out to me. Most humans, in varying degrees, are already dead. In one way or another, they have lost their dreams, their ambitions, their desire for a better life. They've surrendered their fight for self-esteem, and they've compromised their great potential. They've settled for a life of mediocrity, days of despairs, and nights of tears. They're no more than living death confined to cemeteries of their choice. Yet they need not remain in that state. They can be resurrected from their sorry condition. They can each perform the greatest miracle in the world. They can each come back from the dead to become anything they wish to be and to attain all the true riches of life. That was from the author Og Mandino. The chapter offers other spiritual books to help the character along the way, such as works by Aristotle, Don Quixote, and the Bible. Really, all these spiritual books and guides and all self-help books now offer are behavior paths for those who lack the knowledge for how to live by virtue rather than by vice. I have been actively working toward more virtue-driven decision-making, and books like this, along with the universe sending me books like this from like-minded people, are another reminder that when you live with intention, the universe conspires to help you. Regardless of your religious or spiritual views, the law of attraction is real, and the energy you put out to the world is taken from what you consume, who you are around, what you think, and especially what you do. If you surround yourself with those who make you better, are honest with yourself about your failings and shortcomings, and intentional about living rather than merely existing as he described above, you find yourself more awake, more alive, and more prepared to take on whatever challenges come your way. So a few days ago, I celebrated 600 days of sobriety. Now, a lot of people might be surprised because many people didn't ever realize I had a drinking problem, although I know those closest to me did and probably worried about it a lot. As many of you can attest, the relationships we create between the vices in our life, whether these are drinking, inappropriate relationships with others, lying or hiding things, etc., they stem from a myriad of catalysts. For me, these range from the traumas I experienced as a child, from exposure to heavy drug use, violence, and poverty, the societal pressures of the world which influence and also drive my motivation to excel despite and perhaps because of the chaos around me, the isolation of leaving my family at a young age, marrying and having children, and the influences of the military life that asks the family unit to present a state of normalcy, regardless of circumstances, and always the ever-present sense of just not feeling good enough. In other words, my relationship to alcohol developed over a long time, and as a result of a lot of influences, circumstances, reasons, people, places, events, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. My point is the relationship existed and it was toxic right from the start. Take a moment to think about that for just a moment. Does anyone have a healthy relationship with alcohol? Now, don't get me wrong, there are several of people who can have healthy relationships with alcohol. I just don't think these happen very often, and far less often than we portray as a society or when we're honest with ourselves. Chances are the vast majority of people who had to take a second and think, do I have a problem with drinking? Probably do. I wanted to share my story with everyone because one thing is certain. This relationship for me would have ruined all other relationships or the potential for more relationships if I didn't get it under control. A little backstory. So I wasn't a big drinker in high school. I enjoyed more of the Bob Marley approach to life. And what I'd seen of drinking back then was pretty scary, like alcohol poisoning at prom, later regretted hookups, fights, you name it. When I joined the Navy, however, drinking became a survival tactic in a new environment, much like college students experience. It was a coping mechanism for loneliness, a way to reduce my anxieties about meeting new people, and above all, the best way to fit in with a new crowd. It was also a way to exhibit my new freedom, even though legally I wasn't allowed to drink yet. During my marriage and the time I spent with my Navy family, drinking filled all of those same roles for me. It was my survival crutch or my counselor when things got bad in my marriage. Alcohol helped me fight off the loneliness I felt because I wasn't close with my family. And all those drunk dials I made to my dad and brothers and wished I could make to my mom are a testament to that. I loved drinking at social events because I felt that it paved the way for me to be more comfortable meeting new people so I could relax and be myself. It's strange that I can look back now and see that drinking is really what kept me from being myself and having those things I so desperately craved and used alcohol as a replacement for. Throughout my adult life, I've recognized several unsavory habits I wish to change. Inspired by my ex-husband's ability to quit smoking in 2011, I did the same. Both of us cold turkey, I might add. I wanted to become a teacher, so I enrolled in school. My first nutrition class taught me all the ways I'd been eating wrong, so I changed my diet. My kids hated it. I started walking to lose weight, and that evolved into a lifelong journey with fitness. I learned the importance of honesty in my communications with my brothers and worked on nurturing better relationships with them. Every day I got a little closer with my family and I prioritized their importance more. But I also knew that my marriage was toxic, not the people in it, but the marriage itself, and that toxicity was exacerbated by drinking. I mentioned wanting to quit several times and even succeeded at pausing several times on my own, but I never had the support system I thought I needed to do so completely. My ex-husband and I spent several years trying to work through a marriage that was totally worth fighting for, but neither of us really knew that we had to fix ourselves first. Or if we did, we didn't know how to go about it because every effort we made together and apart had failed. Now, many people, again, might be surprised to learn I had such a problem with drinking because I hid it very well, as I think a lot of people do. You also hide it with excuses that you tell yourself. I was the life of the party, even if I drank a little bit too much. I could hold my own with the best of them, could outdrink half the Navy guys at the party and still stand, and rarely missed a day of work because I was hungover. I was functioning, I was successful, I was moving on up. On Facebook, we had the perfect marriage and family. I had friends, a good job. Why would anyone think I had a problem? Besides my husband and my kids, who knew it all along, but unfortunately just didn't know how to help me. And I didn't know how to help myself. When I drank, I made stupid decisions. Sure, the fun times far outweighed the bad, but those stupid decisions always reverberated throughout my life, as I'm sure many of you can attest. When I got divorced, I thought the end to all those triggers that made me drink were gone. What I didn't realize was that the triggers were partly inside and partly environmental. My own feelings of guilt, shame, and unworthiness, along with a whole heap of regrets about all those stupid decisions. The social factors that constantly told me to eat, drink, and be merry. And the fact that my new partner was also a drinker. It's funny and also remarkably sad that we so often fall into the exact same places we found ourselves in before. But if the glitz and glamour is enough to blind us to the truth, it doesn't matter to our thinking minds. For me, this new relationship was the opportunity to do all the same things, but do them right this time. So Einstein said, the definition of insanity is repeating the same actions over and over again and expecting different results. We hear this all the time, but how often we delude ourselves into thinking one thing when the truth is so evident. About 9 months into this relationship, karma hit me slap in the face. The man I was in a new, loving, and amazing relationship did something to me that I'd done myself without thought of harm or consequence in my own marriage. He engaged in one of those wildly inappropriate text relationships with another woman that are so common today. You know, the kind you just don't do when you are in a loving, committed, honest relationship that has specific and stated guidelines for behavior that do not allow this kind of straying outside the relationship. For many people, these kinds of flirty and fun friendships don't mean anything, or that's what they tell themselves anyway. The truth is, they do mean something, and it's not what people think. These kinds of secret, have-to-be-deleted communications are merely symptoms of a larger illness that is so prevalent today and that so many people mask with things like alcohol. We are constantly seeking love, affection, affirmation, and meaning from outside, rather than focusing inward, a task which is altogether much more difficult. Think about how we view alcohol as something that releases inhibitions versus the philosophies of the greatest thinkers throughout history, which teach us that only through introspection and intention can we achieve wisdom. We have to cultivate value systems, but how can we do that when we focus on lowering inhibitions that are biologically designed to protect you as an individual? The amazing author and psychologist Jordan Peterson noted, in a crisis, the inevitable suffering that life entails can rapidly make a mockery of the idea that happiness is the proper pursuit of the individual. For many of us, the idea that we should be seeking happiness at all turns and in all scenarios guides our daily choices, whether we realize it or not. And to me, drinking is the ultimate happiness aid. Think about it this way. When you want to relax, get rid of some stress, have more fun, less anxiety, better sex, you want to dance and be social, add a little bit of alcohol to the mix and bam, instant magnification of fun, courtesy of your favorite drink of choice. So the night that I woke up to the falsities of this framework for thinking about alcohol, I knew I could never allow it to dictate any part of my life again. On October 1st, 2018, I began my journey through life without alcohol, and it was one of the easiest things I'd ever done. All those years, I struggled with feeling ashamed that I needed alcohol, dissolved away in the absolute truth that every day I was better without it. I just quit. Easy as that. I've never looked back. So sure, it was isolating. Who wants to hang out with a sober girl, right? I lost a lot of social opportunities and chances to have fun with my friends. People apologized unnecessarily when they drank around me, and I realized it wasn't really because they were sorry for drinking around me. It was because they were ashamed of thinking that they needed to drink around someone who chose not to drink. And I say that because the only people who apologized, I also know that they're uncomfortable with their relationship to drinking. Subsequently, I also removed all social media at that time because for me, social media was a trigger for drinking, and when drinking, a trigger for bad habits to reemerge. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, hint, hint, messenger. And I knew that I couldn't have one without wanting the other. Social media and drinking were very much in tune with what I was doing. For me, quitting drinking was a keystone habit. So according to Charles Duhigg, who's the author of The Power of Habit, keystone habits are small changes or habits that people introduce into their routines that unintentionally carry over into every other aspect of their lives. Exercise is the other one, and one of the other ones is waking up earlier. So a few days ago, I celebrated 600 days sober. Since that pivotal night and that keystone habit, I've made change after change after change in my life, and the sheer force of improvement that has occurred is staggering. I am honest all the time, all the time. It's frightening how much we lie to others when we've begun each day by lying to ourselves about the things we wish we could change. I approach relationships with others first with integrity, next with compassion, and finally with the newfound knowledge that everyone's perspectives, values, and approaches to thinking differ from mine, and that difference is a wonderful thing. I exhibit more patience, a greater sense of a greater sense of sympathy without allowing my empathetic nature to absorb others' problems and make them my own. My connection with my family and friends is richer than ever before, and even though my circle is much smaller, it is stronger, more reliable, and healthier for me as an individual. I also recognize that this change was something I had to make, but that this specific change might not be right for everyone. My ex-husband did not quit drinking. He didn't have the problem that I did. But he also made other changes to his life that allow his greater self to truly shine forth now that he is no longer trying to live up to the expectations of our toxic marriage. He's remarried and happy, and it's beautiful. My ex-boyfriend wasn't ready to quit drinking, and even though he told me he wanted to get sober right alongside me, he wasn't able to, and so he lied and he drank behind my back to both avoid disappointing me, but also confronting his own demons with alcoholism. I hope one day he'll find the same contentment and satisfaction I've gained in sobriety, but I also recognize that those are my hopes and my hubris, putting my expectations on another person. During the last several weeks, I've gone through one enormous shift after another, and sharing this story with you, even if no one watches it, is an important part of my personal development. You see, this last week, an old friend reached out to me via social media. Now, this wasn't someone that I was particularly close with. This was literally someone I hadn't talked to in 20 years. And the first message I got, I knew that this individual was inebriated. It was the middle of the night. Nothing I had written should have inspired this person's interest, and immediately I recognized a kindred spirit, someone who was seeking outside attention to fill a void inside, largely influenced by alcohol. In the course of our short conversation, this person mentioned every single trigger or excuse that I'd once had, because I totally called this person out and asked, "Are you drunk?" I enjoyed sharing my own experiences, but really I didn't think the message was going to sink in. A few days later, during my new morning routine of writing every day, which is another important concept I've learned from my reading, which is that you have to prioritize your passions every single day, it hit me. I had been sober for over 600 days. My mom, another individual whose sobriety from drugs has altered every element of her life for the better, suggested that I keep track of the number of days since I decided to act on my intuition to protect and nurture myself and my future. So over 600 days ago, I knew that if I didn't change my life, I would always be stuck. Now, I know that my daily choice to avoid alcohol is one tangible way I can walk that fine line between order and chaos. So to me, seeking happiness is one path, but understanding that happiness only comes from working through suffering to achieve wisdom is the right path. For me, this includes reminding myself every day that alcohol never really added to my life. But by allowing it to dictate my behavior, I allowed it to take many things from my life. That's not to say that I'm perfect or don't have other vices. Everyone does, and no one's perfect. But I do have the power to manifest what I want in my life. And I also, thanks to a clear mind and a stable heart, have the courage to be honest with myself and make choices that not only add to my life, but to the lives of the others around me. So Jordan Peterson again said, every death is simultaneously a metamorphosis. So think of it this way. If you let the old habits die and virtue and intention live, you not only survive, but you thrive and you evolve. Removing alcohol from my life was one of the biggest catalysts for change I've ever endured, but wow, the results have never been more rewarding, more meaningful, and more instrumental in my personal development into the person I want to be than anything else I've ever experienced. It's been the key to all of my happiness because finally I can see clearly, think clearly, act with intention instead of relying on liquid courage to face the inevitable suffering of life. So perhaps drinking is not an issue for you, but chances are there's something that you need to change. If this story inspires even one person to recognize what that thing is, it'll be worth sharing. I've debated for a long time about whether or not I wanted to share this level of candidness about my personal experiences, but the interactions I've had recently illuminated the absolute need for more honesty. I tell my college students all the time, we learn best when we learn from each other. And while that's partially true, and it certainly helps my discussion question responses, the greater truth is that we learn best when we learn from ourselves. So honestly, what's holding you back from making that one change in your life? If it has even a fraction of the significance that quitting drinking has for me, then it is definitely worth thinking about. Thank you.